The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back to Sustainable Voice. This is Ashish, along with special guest Jennifer. Jen, how are you?
I'm doing so well. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to have you on. And we have a special guest behind you. Is that Bonnie?
Yeah, this is Bonnie Ochsenfeld. She's a very happy girl. Loves to hang out with me in my office, so have to have her by every day.
Bonnie is, yeah, you know what? I got to tell you, I grew up with German Shepherds.
Oh, yeah? I didn't know
have
that.
a soft spot for German Shepherds. They, in my opinion, they are the smartest creatures on earth.
They are. I believe you, and they know it too. She knows that she's smarter than me, and she takes full advantage of that.
Well,
Let me
look
tell
at
you.
her. She's staring at you every
so
day.
Free. Oh, it melts my heart.
How old is she now?
About 10 now. She's an old lady, and so she lounges.
Don't want to talk about
no. Yeah. But she naps a lot, so she'll hopefully fall asleep and not interrupt us. But no promises.
She's chilled. Well, we're going to be talking about sustainable aviation fuel, something you know a lot about.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that as well. But before we do, two things that I want to make sure that we talk about. One, for all of you that are hitting that subscribe button, thanks for doing it. For those of you that haven't yet, seriously, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit that bell notification. Our numbers are hitting record numbers now. We're starting to add record numbers of subscribers and record numbers of downloads and listeners every month. So thank you for that. Whatever channel, whatever medium you listen to us on, hit the like button, subscribe button, bell notification. The algorithm, you know how it works. My Arizona Wildcats, as of this recording and the NBA draft that just happened, 3 separate players got drafted to the NBA. So to the Knicks, to the Bucks, and to the Raptors, you're welcome.
Oh, there you go. Go Sports.
That's it. All right. So let's jump in. So, Jen, we're going to talk specifically about sustainable aviation fuel, but not just in general. A lot of stuff has happened since you were on this podcast.
Yeah, over a year ago.
And obviously, this is going to tie directly into what's happening in the Middle East and this jet fuel crisis. And we're going to go into the conversation, what changed and where the conversation comes in. But before we do, can you share with our listeners your prior work in carbon offsetting and just your history here? Because it's just so rich.
Well, thanks. Well, right now I work for a tour operator called VBT Country Walkers. So I'm an operations coordinator. One of my main parts of my role is to just see how we can make our trips that we take our guests on more sustainable and more responsible for the communities that we visit. So that's what I'm doing right now. But educational wise, my background is in sustainability. My degree in college was in conservation biology. And then after college, I made the switch into the travel industry with lots of continuing ed in travel specific sustainability. So I've done a lot of hours of just learning both on my own and in classes, and I do know a good amount about sustainability in the travel sector.
Right on. That's very cool. And you and I sit on a board for travel, something called Travel for Better.
Yeah.
We sit on that board together with our dear friend Annie, who was actually on for the last episode.
I know. I heard about that. I can't wait to listen.
She killed
Love Annie. I bet she did. She kills everything she does. Come on.
Did she tell you, by the way, that her husband got to meet Harrison Ford and basically sit down and chill with him? And
no. When did that happen?
Yeah, they got to hang out at the bar, and I don't know how much the whiskey bottles were costing, but they were talking and whatnot. And of course, me being who I am, I went to her. I go, "Did you guys talk about Star Wars or Tron?
Right.
Or did you talk about
completely
Indiana
different
Jones
camps,
or Indiana Jones and the movies that he probably shouldn't have made?"
Yeah, there's a lot of those. Well, there's just a lot of movies in general from him, but.
Yeah. I mean, I love him, but there's a couple of Indiana Jones, the last 2.
They should stop while they're ahead, but they never do.
Nah, they
with
don't
sequels.
learn.
They don't. That's
then again,
okay.
neither do we. So
yeah,
there's
true.
that. Well, we talked last time about sustainable aviation fuel, and we talked about where it comes from and why it's suddenly being talked about in boardrooms and everywhere else. So, we have the crisis. It's all over the news. The fact that there's a jet fuel crisis, there's a movement, and also obviously as of this recording, things are starting to come to a head. I won't get into the political side of it. Let's leave that for somebody else.
Cool.
But things are starting to come to a head. There is more fuel starting to flow now. The oil prices are coming down. Where does jet fuel come from? What is sustainable aviation fuel in relation to jet fuel? Let's start there.
Yeah, so right now, the vast majority of jet fuel is straight from the ground, straight from fossil fuels. It's crude oil that they refine and put in jets to make them go. What sustainable aviation fuel does is it takes away the fossil fuel aspect and just makes jet fuel from other sources, like anything from algae to municipal waste, so the things that you throw away in your garbage can. It's a drop-in fuel, so you can use it, and you don't have to make any special engine for the planes to use. It can go in and it can actually mix with fossil fuel-based jet fuel. So it's something that's very promising in that it doesn't require carbon on the back end. It still emits CO2 and other greenhouse gases, but it doesn't. It comes from more sustainable sources in the first place.
Well, and you and I have talked about this as well offline. Sustainable aviation fuel is now being used as the new football. It's the new political football. It's creating tension in environment as an environmental necessity. Is it a geopolitical strategy? It's being tossed around. I'll propose this to you. Do any of the people who punt this around like a football actually know what they're talking about?
That's a great question that I'm going to try to answer kindly. I mean, no. Policymakers are supposed to rely on experts to advise them so that they can make the right choices for the people that they, represent. Does that ever happen? Not necessarily, especially with this. I think it's just being used people hear the term sustainable. That's a great buzzword to be able to up their popularity. They hear it can reduce up to 80% of the emissions. That sounds good. So they're I don't want to say pandering, but they definitely don't know how it works because, it's a very complicated process. The engineers know how it works. I don't fully understand how the refinement process works. But it is, as you said, like a political tool being used right now. And out of all the political tools, I'll take it. Like if the governments want to, use this as a football that they want to get their agenda done with, I'm fine with that and I support it. But I do think there's less understanding on the side of policymakers than there should be, or less trust in the people who do understand it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I couldn't agree more. You hear some of these makers talking about this, and it's unfortunate. What's not actually being addressed is when something like the crisis that occurred on the Strait of Hormuz. I had one policymaker call it the Strait of Hormuz, which where his mind is right away. And no, sir, the bar is not open yet. But the Strait of Hormuz.
That's pretty funny.
And it's everybody knows where it is now if they didn't before.
Yeah.
So obviously the tensions bring this to life. All that was happening, that they bring in the supply of A1 supply chains, jet fuel supply chains. But what's not being talked about is the disproportionate impact of this shortage of jet fuels. You have European airlines, European countries talking about a jet fuel shortage, and then you have a disproportionate number of African countries and their airlines talking about grounding place and a real shortage, which was already in existence before all this started, simply because a lot of these countries don't have the money to even borrowing money there. So, but so there's this is not being talked about enough, right? So
no.
Let's separate that part. When you see these countries in Africa, when we're both in the same industry, and we see these countries in Africa, when you see these countries that have been struggling with jet fuel, struggling with the rising cost of it, even if it's a falling cost of it, they still struggle with the supply of it. Are we doing anything to address that? Is that even being brought up in a conversation?
The sad answer is no. As with any of the impacts from climate change, global warming, it impacts the poorest among us first. And unfortunately, the poorest among us are majority in the global south. So, and the richest among us are dealing with their own problems that they are feeling. So they're not thinking about anybody else outside of themselves. They're just trying to save their own skin. So I haven't seen hardly in any of the news coverage, especially in the United States, any mention of what's going on in South America and in Africa. I had to do a little bit of digging and find some other news sources in order to learn more about it. But it is just not being addressed by people in the West, unfortunately.
So let me ask this as well, because you're the right person to ask this. When we talk about climate change and we talk about there is a need for sustainable aviation fuel. There is a need to shift to this because we are talking about a finite resource. There is a need. And we're also talking about a resource that, as we just saw, could be weaponized.
Yeah.
As a
actively, always. Yeah. We've weaponized oil since we started digging it out of the ground.
Absolutely. So outside of that, there is a need. And that's, you just hit the nail on the head. That's the part that's not being talked about. Right. I would say that any of these policymakers that don't understand sustainable aviation fuel, they do understand how to weaponize a commodity.
They do understand they learned that day one.
Absolutely. It's a sidebar. but I had the pleasure of meeting Jane Goodall when I was a teenager. I think
I
it was
didn't know
15.
that. That's
Oh,
so
yeah, I got
cool.
to meet.
I'm so
It's
jealous.
I got to tell you, so I'm going to equate this to policymakers, and it's going to come across the wrong way. And if they take it the wrong way, you know what? Tough.
Mm-hmm.
So she was obviously studying chimpanzees, and she talked about how smart they are. And one of the things that hurt her the most, in Tanzania, she saw two factions of chimpanzees start an 8-year civil war. And what depressed her the most and just surprised her the most was not the 8-year civil war. It's that she had convinced herself that we had to teach them about war. And it turns out they knew all about it before we did.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not
almost
going to,
innate.
I'm not going to equate policymakers to chimpanzees. I think chimpanzees are smarter. Chimpanzees are
I was going to
smarter.
say, okay, good. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I am going to say that every time we elect a policymaker, and it doesn't matter where it is in the world, we seem to keep thinking that they don't understand, or they're going to approach the weaponizing of a commodity as with naivete, all right, with some sort of naivety. Was that the right word?
Naivete.
Naivete to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That with some sort of approach like that, and maybe take an earnest, a non-jaded approach to how to solve it. And then we're all constantly disappointed because it turns out we don't have to teach them how to weaponize it.
No, they already know how. Yeah.
They already know how.
And
So-
it's not, they're not using it to better our lives.
Right.
They're using it to better their own lives. And it's a very
Well,
human thing to do.
Exactly. And that's just going to tell you, it's just a dawn of time, right? It's a human
Mhm.
nature thing to do, right? And is that what's holding back this conversation of sustainable aviation fuel? Is that what's
Wow.
holding back progress? And I ask this because Brazil is taking the lead in implementing sustainable aviation
Right.
fuel because they have to, right?
Yeah.
They're being forced to.
And they have a lot of feedstock. They're the main exporter of the beef tallow, which is one of the main things we use to make SAF. So yeah, they have the resources and they have the needs. So we like it when those two things come together.
So yeah, exactly. And if they come together, then it's being done, but it's being done out of necessity.
Right.
Is that what has to happen to move the needle? Unfortunately, is that what has to occur?
Are policymakers ever going to make a change that they're not pushed to do? I think that answer is no. They're not going to do something unless it makes them more money or more power. They're not going to do it. And This is not something that does either of those things. So there is more knowledge. The public knows more about how many emissions come from the airline industry. So there's a push on the constituency end. To answer your question, yes, I think they need to be pushed. I think we are pushing, maybe not hard enough. And there's just all the barriers in place of big oil makes a lot of money on regular traditional jet fuel. There's a lot of money in the politics surrounding this area.
Right.
And I think that is the main barrier. It's not necessary. Well, they're one and the same. Policymakers are not going to do something unless they're pushed, and they're only going to be pushed.
Right.
When people know more about it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. This was the main thing. And this is why this disproportionate response occurs, right? So when you see what's happening in countries in Africa, countries in South America, for example, they can't refine, for the most part, they can't refine Gulf oil. They never have been. So there's this notion that, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is going to create global shortages. Well, in Latin America, they don't get their oil from there for the most part. They can't refine it. They don't have the systems to refine it. It comes from domestic sources. It comes from the U.S. It comes from, at some point it did come from Venezuela. Who knows what will happen in the future? But it's there. And some of the refineries, like in Peru and Colombia, they have not been invested in properly, and so they're faltering.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that brings us this part of the question. When we talk about, just in general, the movement, are we talking about a shift from green goal from the green goal of SAF to energy sovereignty? Does SAF now represent the ability for some of these developing non-industrialized nations to not have oil weaponized against their aviation sector? Which in many of these countries, Colombia in particular, others, it is a major contributor to the economy.
Yeah, definitely.
Is this a shift towards that?
I see it as such. I think that happens over and over again when there's something that comes out that we know is better for the planet, like EVs or LED lighting or solar and wind, like renewables. There's something that environmentalists or scientists come up with that say, hey, this is a better alternative and it doesn't cause emissions. The global community at large sees that and writes them off as hippies and leaves it in the dust until there's a need, like the oil crisis in the 70s led to a vast expansion of research for the renewable energy sources. There needs to be a push, unfortunately, from the money side in order to get the policymakers and the industry to invest in the hippie side.
Okay. We're gonna use that to call it the hippie side. That works. Okay. So here's a question for you. Because it is a shift to energy sovereignty. However, is sustainable aviation fuel more profitable for airlines, or can it be more profitable for airlines?
That is a great and complicated question. I think right now it's not, because the infrastructure to create the sustainable aviation fuel is not there. So right now it's kind of a money suck to try to build up this supply chain. That traditional fuel the supply chain's been in place for like 100 years now. So it is robust. They know what they're doing. It's very well done. This is newer, pretty brand new, I'd say. And so we still have pockets of places that are researching and developing it. And we don't have it connected to the airlines who necessarily need to buy it. So there's a whole process of acquiring the material you need to make the fuel, refining it, making the fuel, shipping it to whoever needs it, and then figuring out how to mix it with the fuel that you already have. So it's a very complex system that we haven't figured out completely yet to make a robust supply chain. But
well, let's back up a second, because as we said, Brazil is leading the way in this because they actually have the supply chain in place already.
Exactly.
What does the supply chain look like? Let's say you and I are starting a country. Not a bad
Be
idea.
a pretty cool
actually.
place. Yeah, I like it.
Pretty cool place to live. Nothing but hippies. We'll call
exactly.
it hippie. We'll call
hippie
it
land.
Hip land.
There it is. I dig it.
I love it.
Groovy.
Okay. So let's say we're starting a groovy. Why do I get the picture of the professor from The Simpsons? Disco Stew. I'm getting the picture of Disco Stew, or even the hippie professor.
He's
from The
invited.
Simpsons.
Yeah.
He's invited. Disco Stew. He's got to bring the shoes with the goldfish.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So sidebar.
We're starting a country. We're making SAF. Was that your next?
So we're making SAF. Where do we start? We want to be a resource. We want to be a major exporter of SAF. Just like, for example, there's a race to become exporters of rare earth minerals.
Yeah.
We want to become an exporter of sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah.
Where does that start?
It would start with deciding how we want to make the fuel. There are 11 different processes that have been certified to make sustainable aviation fuel. Some use algae, some use forest residue. So like you cut down trees and all the bits that come off of it, you use that. Some use used cooking oil. China's very into the production of SAF using cooking oils. So pick a lane and then figure out how to get as much of that as possible. So if we pick algae, we have to figure out how to farm the algae, and we have to put a lot of money in to increase the scale, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of whatever feedstock you're using to make a little bit of fuel. So just really lay into the development of whatever the source of your fuel is, and then hire scientists to refine it and develop it into the actual fuel.
Let's bust one of these myths that policymakers put out there right now.
Let's do it.
Because I could see them going, well, if you got to use up all this algae, you're breaking something else to make aviation fuel. Hold on one second, bucko.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we are talking of the three, obviously the algae route or the cooking oil is the routes we want to take, right? Nobody wants to cut down trees.
No.
So if we have those two routes, the argument can be made that, well, in order to make the volume we need, not just to be able to provide SAF to our country, but to be a major exporter of it, would be on a grand scale. You would be destroying something to create that. How true or false is that?
It's both, because people are taking advantage and, chopping down virgin forests and just planting vast palm, plantations in order to get the palm oil to sell to make SAF. It does not have to be like that. Do you know how much trash we throw away in the United States? I don't know the number. It's exorbitant. We can use that trash that we already are putting in landfills or incinerating or shipping off to the middle of the ocean. We can take that and turn it into SAF. We don't have to start with these like virgin forests, or we don't have to take from the environment. We can take away from what we're polluting in order to make the fuel.
So to process used cooking oil.
Yeah.
To process algae, there is a money suck involved. There is an infrastructure you have to build. There is investment. But the same can be said for crude oil.
Right. And the externalities of crude oil are way worse than taking our trash.
And that was just it. If we were to, is it a fair statement to say that if we were to look at the money required to scale up the production or the processing of algae or used oil, to use cooking oil to be able to create SAF, that would be at a lower scale than what it takes to start a refinery?
That's a complex question too, because I mean, we already know like the research and we know so much about how to refine crude oil. We've been doing that for so long that we're so good at it. And this is new. We have to, like, for the cooking oil aspect, we would have to put a whole recycling system in place nationally in order to collect people's used cooking oil or to collect it from these restaurants or wherever we're getting it from.
Which is not impossible to do.
Which is not impossible to do. We know how. We just have to have the political will to do it, which is the problem. So money-wise, I don't know enough about economics to answer that specific question.
I got you covered there.
Oh, I love it. Hit me with it.
I got you covered there.
Yeah.
So, from a refinery standpoint, you take a look at all these major companies. The way I have been educated, the main reason why you don't see a lot of these energy companies, the major ones, like shifting over to provide electricity. Some of them have. For example, two separate petroleum companies have actually bought energy grids to be able to actually create a network of charging stations, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing it built out right now. The same could be said that some of these actually want to invest in creating SAF. They can make it more profitable because once you get it scaled, it is safer to mine this. It is safer to be able to process this because of the amount of, right now, the amount of rigs that are failing. There's calamities, there's catastrophe on these rigs. That the level of injuries, loss of life is increasing every single year.
Yeah.
We get more into to drilling, we get more into fracking, we get into all these different things. The politics behind is one thing. I'm talking about the loss of human life.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I will say historically has not mattered to these companies. They don't care. But the journalism coverage, people are hearing about it more, which I think is the actual push. They don't want to run their car for 10 people to have to been maimed. They don't want to do that, so they're pushing back. Which is good to see.
So I think the answer lies in what you just said earlier, which is the amount of trash that we actually throw away and ship overseas. To be clear, when we talk about the actual ability to refine the waste, I'm going to look up while you're talking this as to how much waste we do throw away. For those of you who don't know, the waste that we throw away doesn't stay here. A lot of it gets shipped overseas. We have agreements with countries in Asia, specifically China. When we were talking this whole thing with tariffs, there was the idea of a country taking our waste became weaponized as well. So that's actually where we start. I think when we build a country, the first place we have to start is what we do with the waste, right?
Exactly.
If people are there, we build a country, we buy an island or buy a territory and we build a country there and we make our sovereign state. We give people tax breaks to move there and everything else and whatnot. So we have an incentive for people to move there. Business starts, industry starts, an economy is formed. Okay, great, fantastic. But I think why I asked that question is because I think what's getting missed right now is this notion of what you just said, the waste. The Chinese do an amazing job, as you said, of actually reusing this waste oil. For everything you read about in the news about how negative they are, they're bad, good, everything else, it's like you've evil empire, good empire.
It's totally not propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. Let's remove all that for a second. For the second most populous country in the world that actually identified during the last Olympics that was there that they do have a pollution issue. They do have an energy issue. They have a grid that is absolutely taxed. But now what people are starting to understand. Some people have seen their electric vehicles, for example, Xiaomi, BYD. They're light years ahead of us.
Yeah.
In terms of tech. I mean, it's on a different scale. And anybody who says they don't, listen, I know you love your Tesla. That's great, fantastic. But you need to actually see what they're doing.
Yeah. Go somewhere else. See what other people are doing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean,
travel.
That part. Exactly. Travel. Go see it. But what they're actually doing is taking all the waste that we are sending to them and okay, we'll pay you for it. And then they're finding ways to monetize it on their side. So as a country, we should start there. That's measure the waste, and it's the recycling center comes first. Everything the processing center comes first. Everything is how do we separate out? Our foundation just actually started funding this project in Colombia that actually does something with food waste that I thought was incredible, and it's not complicated. So the process that he uses is on his rooftop, so any house can do this, right? It's on his rooftop, so whatever your waste food is, basically just gets blended up. Once it's blended up, he pours it basically looks like baby food, pours it into this machine. And I did it myself and it was incredible. The machine separates out the solid from the liquid. The solid gets basically ground up and used as fertilizer. The liquid then gets, and the liquid, I mean water.
Yeah.
That basically gets pushed through and becomes irrigation, right?
Oh, wow.
It's not
That's super cool. Yeah.
It's really cool. It's not overly complicated because it's already being put in place in some of the safari camps in Africa. It's being put in place in some of the green hotels in Latin America. It's being put in place in different structures, different areas. But we're talking about doing it systematically.
Right. On a global scale.
On a global scale.
Doing it on your rooftop is one thing. Doing it for the whole world is quite a different thing.
So actually, it's funny you say that.
Hmm?
If we have a country and we have a population of 5 million people and 5 million people, and let's say we have 1 million homes for 5 million people, just as an example, what if it was mandated that every single rooftop had this contraption?
Yeah.
And it wasn't for water, it was specifically for oil. It was to capture used vegetable oil. And if before anybody says that that's not possible to institutionalize this, well, Namibia, the country of Namibia actually wrote the notion of sustainability into their constitution as an amendment. It is required by law for you to have either solar panels, alternative energy forms, so you're never going to be taxing the grid. When you hear about blackouts happening, which we have them in the US, you have them in Europe, you have them in certain countries in Africa, you don't hear about it in Namibia.
Right.
You don't hear about it there.
And I think your word mandate was good because people are not, if our country existed and we asked people to, you might get some. I would definitely do it. You would definitely do it. People who care, people who know, people who want to save a buck, but you're not going to get the output that you need unless the government steps in with a policy to require corporations to do the right thing. And that is something we just don't do in America. I think it's something China does very well. They looked at the global situation of what was happening with climate change. They listened to their scientists, and then they made policy changes. And it's a lot easier to make a policy change when you have a dictatorial government. I understand that. We have, democracy or what have you. And it's a lot harder to get things done that way. But it's so necessary. It's so needed. And you would think that our policymakers want to lean in.
So if you look at an economic scale, China versus the US, yes, we're the largest economy in the world. I'm not picking on any policy here, but here's the mathematical fact. China's economy is growing faster than ours.
Yeah. Has been since what, 2008?
Exactly. Since 2008.
Yeah.
It has been. And that's in spite of having, and their economy is also slowing down. They've got their own issues internally, obviously.
Right. Everybody does.
But then they asked the one key question that every government is already asking. How do we make money from this?
Yep.
How do we monetize
That's true.
this?
And then they use that to fuel it. That's a good point.
So I'm just challenging every policymaker. Look, if you don't believe in SAF, you don't this, okay, fine. If I showed you there's a way to make money from it, would you change your mind?
Of course they would.
If I told you that instead of actually sending all of our waste overseas, we actually invested in refinement centers here and did everything else, whatnot, would that change your mind? With the fact that it would actually allow airlines to increase their profits? Because this is a true statement, right? So once the infrastructure is built out, that's the expensive part.
Right.
The actual purchase of SAF and the utilization costs less.
Vastly lower. Yes. Okay. That was your question earlier. Yes. If you build out the infrastructure in order to make enough that you need, they would save a lot of money, and they would still charge their customers the same amount.
Absolutely.
So yes, the profit margin would grow.
So the average airline, if you read their 10K report, some of them, and look, we just had Spirit go out of business, JetBlue's teetering. There's a whole bunch of others that are there as well, right? And that's just not here. There's others. And if you look at countries in Africa, there's airlines there that even flag carriers for countries that are living on borrowed time.
Right.
All the Air India is talking about being privatized again or having issues there. South African Airways was reborn after being privatized and taken into bankruptcy. Our Aerolíneas Argentina is never turned a profit ever. And what if you went to all these governments and said, your flag carrier has never turned a profit. Your flag carrier is a money pit. Mm-hmm. It's just sucking the economy dry, and it's governmentally funded. It is taxpayer money that goes into it. If you use that money, and yes, there's an initial investment, and there is a structure, not a green loan, but a structure from the IMF or the World Bank, who they're already very good at giving predatory lending. They're very good at that already.
Right.
So, all right, give one more predatory loan. We'll abide by your
Something
terms.
Good will come of it. We promise.
Something good will come of this particular loan, right?
Yes.
You can't force us to do anything. So we go to the IMF, the World Bank, and say, okay, you know what? You're very good at predatory lending. Fine, we'll take one more loan from you at 5 points over prime, and we'll come in. We'll give us the money so we can actually build this infrastructure out. We're going to use whatever method you say. You're going to be in charge of policy for that side. We're going to basically build out whatever method you want to build out here. But then we go to we send an open skies agreement agreement with all these airlines around the world and say, if you come to our country and actually base and create a hub in our country and you commit to using SAF, you don't have to lower your prices, but we can take your profit margin, which your EBITDA is somewhere around 3%, 4%, or even 10%, and we can increase it tenfold. We can increase it 20-fold, simply because the cost of fuel is going to be much less. Oh, and by the way, the cost of fuel that we're giving you cannot be weaponized. So something happens in a different part of the world that oil producing countries are located in, and something happens like what just happened here, they cannot, it doesn't impact your profit margins. This is stuff that is in abundance, because as long as we are living and breathing and creating waste, guess what?
We have it.
This is good that we have it. We have it. We're not looking at trying to find new pockets. Right now, every country in Europe in particular is looking for ways to get oil from somewhere other than Russia, somewhere other than the Gulf. They're not succeeding, but every country is trying, right? I remember listening to somebody that I follow online who knows a lot about fossil fuels and about oil, and he was in our chambers, and our policymaker says, well, the U.S. is a major exporter of oil and a major producer of oil. He stopped and said, no, the U.S. is not. Our companies that are based here, they are. We don't own any of it.
Right. Because what is America but 3 large corporations in a trench coat?
Right. And that's the same thing to be said for UK, for most of the EU, for Australia, every one of them, right?
I will say, I think we do it best.
Absolutely.
Best is, but America's.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's the thing. But what if that's, so we're not sure. So instead of trying to get them to think differently, what if we went to all the policymakers and basically said, hey, we can force your hand because we can get these private sector airlines that are right now contributing to the economy. And if they actually move their hub from XYZ country to your and my country, to HIPland, and basically say that by putting your airline here and by us having the infrastructure to create SAF and to be able to use it, we are going to allow you to increase your profit margin. So you can fly everywhere in the world, but your most profitable route starts in our country. You don't think these airlines are going to shift their hubs out of everywhere else to come to our country to say, yeah, that makes total sense. You don't
I think it's a huge development opportunity, definitely.
Right.
If the policymakers have the foresight, because it is going to, it takes time. They don't. That's the problem, is that they're not thinking 10 years ahead. They're thinking, how can I maximize my profits right now at the expense of everything else, which is not a way to run things, but it's how we've been doing it, unfortunately.
Well, and also, so here's the thing, right? So we have this delicate agreement called the Paris Accords, right? The Paris Agreement that we dropped out of. Yeah. And other countries have dropped out of as well now.
Right.
So it's delicate to begin with, the Paris Agreement. First of all, does that agreement actually address or understand SAF properly?
I mean, it was signed in 2016 when we had a vague idea of what SAF might be in the future. So I think, no. I think it can be amended and we can readdress it with future, things. But right now, no, this is not part of that, unfortunately.
So that actually, I'm glad you said that, because that was part of it, is that I think every country should withdraw from it and write a new agreement. Right. Yeah, I know you were like, wait, what?
No, well, no, I mean, it's not good enough. It's not even half good enough.
Right. We
need to be doing so much more. It's just the fact that we pulled out of it because it was too much, and so did some other country. Like, and the non-binding nature of it, it doesn't, we make claims and then we may or may not follow through. So yeah, I agreed. Something new needs to come about.
Something new. And you look at any world leader, right? When you have a high-level meeting, usually who's in the room is not just the policymakers, but the CEOs of major corporations, whether it's the banking sector, whether it's the energy sector, but the CEOs of the technology sector. You just saw it happen in China, right? You saw who was on the plane. Jamie Dimon, you had Elon Musk, you had, what's his name? Was it, Mr. Wong from NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I forget his first name. I'm so sorry. But you have him. You have a bunch of people there. You've got the head of BlackRock. You've got all these different asset managers. You've got financial firms. You've got energy sector. You got Jeff Bezos there. You have the CEO of Microsoft there. The CEO of the current CEO of Google there. You've got all these people that are there, and the largest bank in the world. You think they were talking about the Strait of Hormuz? Come on. No. So my point is that we are willing to get these CEOs together to make a think tank. Great. But when we're making actual policy, like the Paris Agreement, they're not in the room.
No.
We are a capitalistic society. I remember having a conversation with somebody who was talking about, well, we shouldn't be a capitalistic. We should be this, we should that. each their own, right? Each their
Sure.
own. The world is capitalistic.
Right now,
The
yes.
world is, right now it is, and is driven in this way. As we move towards stable coins, rare earth minerals, that who knows where that leads, right? There's a lot of unknowns that are there. But the world by and large does run on growth. Businesses growing, GDP
Yes.
growing, which is separate.
Exponential growth,
Which is
Right.
a different definition than capitalistic. A lot of people think that means the same thing.
right?
It's
They
two
don't
separate
have to
things.
be, but they do go hand in hand a
They
lot
do
of the
go
times.
hand in hand. Exactly. They don't have to be, but they do go
Right.
hand in hand. When you look at China, yes, they're a communist country. They're
Yeah.
focused on economic
Their
growth.
business hubs are, yeah, exactly.
Yes, and they do it quite well.
Mhm.
India, same thing. India
Right.
is where it's a different type of economy. They focus on growth as well. What I'm saying is, when these agreements are signed, whether it's the Paris Accords, whether it is any kind of non-proliferation treaty, whenever it is any kind of a trade agreement, why are these CEOs not in the room then?
It's a great question that, again, I would try to answer kindly, but I don't know that they deserve that. It's going to shift the way the world works, and the way the world works right now works great for them. And
Absolutely.
so why would they want to change anything?
I'm going to say something controversial here, and I don't know if you're going to
hit
agree
me
with it
with
or not.
We'll see.
If we form Hipland, this might be the end of Hipland if you don't agree with it. So if we form Hipland, you are the energy secretary, or
Great.
you are. Let's say you and I are. We run the country. Okay.
Great.
So you're in charge of all the energy. I'll be
Duopoly?
in charge of economics. Okay.
Yeah, please take the economics. I don't
got
want that side.
Then let's say we take a CEO of an energy company, a successful one that understands what we're trying to do, but one who sees profit margins, and make them Secretary of Energy and say, okay, you're in charge of this. We want you to fatten the profits of these energy companies, but want you to do it in a clean way.
Yeah,
we want them to
responsible.
make money. We want them, but you have to have an agreement in place to reinvest X% back into this.
Yeah.
You have to have a percent to do this. You have to do this. Again, the mandate exists. The precedent exists. Some countries already have this mandate, right?
Yep.
And any country who says, well, there's no mandate to force people. Yes, there is. It's called taxing. You all pay your taxes on time.
We've been doing it the whole time.
The mandate exists. So
Exactly.
it's there. So I would basically that you have your Treasury Secretary is the head of the largest bank, right? And basically comes in and says, okay, this is how, again, we want banks to have free flowing cash, have capital, and be able to make loans, and be able to structure them, give loan businesses money to have them grow and everything else, whatnot. You start looking at a structure, right? And there's some very bright minds out there who are taking us the simple thing that I'm suggesting. And I'm by no means am I an expert in any of this stuff, but to be able to take this and say, okay, yeah, we can create this. And what I'm saying it does is it basically does lead to clear mandates. And the reason I say it is because in the EU and the UK, you have blended mandates. You don't have a clear separation of mandates. The UK was part of the EU. Now they're not part of the EU. They're trying to get back to the EU.
Right. The drama.
The drama that goes into it. Their prime minister just resigned as of this recording. And what? I mean, it's nonstop. There's no clear mandate, right? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think things are not going to change unless there are mandates, unless the government makes corporations do the right thing, quote unquote. So yeah, the EU, I mean, they want to be 10% SAF of their fuel, because right now, I don't think we've talked about it. Right now, the amount of sustainable aviation fuel that's being used is less than 1% of the fuel that we need in order to run all of our planes that we
you got to
fly.
be kidding me. Seriously?
Yeah, it's very low. So, but I mean, the EU, the UK, different government bodies around the world are pushing to have more research, to settle out their supply chains, to develop more, so that by 2030, the EU wants to have, 6%, which is not great. But by 2040, they want to be doing 34%. So it does take a long time, but they want to be transitioning almost fully over to this side, which would not happen unless there was a mandate or a monetary incentive.
Right.
Which there is.
Or both.
Or both. Yeah. Especially when there's both. I think we can get things done faster.
Right.
But yeah.
And I think you just nailed it. So that's where we start. There has to be a mandate and a monetary incentive, both, which I agree with fully, right? There has to be both. I mean, how do you explain to somebody that their flight to XYZ country now costs more?
That, I feel, is not that hard of a question. Hey, that was a simple question. I love it. I mean, I would just say, if somebody asked me that, I would say, you've heard of Iran, right? You've heard of what's going on in the Middle East? They'll probably say, yeah. I'll say, that's what's happening. When our flow of oil, 20% of the world's oil gets disrupted, it's going to have major globalized effects because we're a globalized system now. So when something happens way over there, it's going to affect us way over here.
100%. Does this crisis now force the hand to accelerate the transition to SAF?
I think it does. I think it is. I mean, both the EU and the UK, I think, what is it? The UK just launched $280 million low carbon fuels fund, like earlier this month. They're pouring a lot of money into the development of SAF. So, and they're not doing that because they just heard about it. They're not doing it because the scientists have been telling them for 20 years that it's the way to go. They're doing it because Trump invaded Iran. That's
right.
Yep.
Right. So they're doing it because they see what the politicians are doing.
Exactly.
Right?
They're seeing what's going on. They can't afford it, or it's getting too expensive. Their profit margins are shrinking. They want an alternative, which, again, I'm here for.
Back to what you said. There is a mandate and a monetary incentive, right?
Exactly.
What if there's a uniform approach, right? Politicians will be politicians, right? And I think wars are going to happen. It's unfortunately, again, just like what Jen Goodall said, right? I mean, the most disappointing aspect of when we elect somebody new, doesn't matter where they are in the world, is the one thing
that they're human.
We don't have to teach them about war. We can teach them about everything else, but we don't have to teach them about war. Sadly, they already know it.
Yep.
Right. There is a time and a place for a conflict. There's a time and a place for that. I wish there wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm
in the camp of it never has to happen because we have brains, we can talk to each other.
Has to happen,
but it's not a realistic. I'm called a radical and an idealist when I say that.
No, look, idealist is there. I found out after my father passed away, I found out that we left our country in Africa. We left Kenya because he was worried about a coup. This is in the early 80s. He was worried about a coup. I watched my uncle 2 years ago leave Sudan. He's the last of my mom's family to leave Sudan as a refugee, and the country's in civil war now and destroying itself again.
Right.
Just
Still,
the latest. And now it wasn't enough that the country broke into two. It wasn't enough that there's now two separate civil wars happening in both countries with no sign of ending.
No.
Right. And it's going to get progressively worse. So I would love that conflict isn't necessary. I would love it to be there. And I would actually argue that if there is a mandate and a monetary incentive to become, let's say, for example, the same way we're talking about, there's a mandate and a monetary incentive to have SAF. If there's a mandate and a monetary incentive to not have conflict, and I know some of it already exists, but it has to have teeth, right?
Yeah.
The Security Council doesn't have any teeth.
I would argue that there's mandates and incentives to do the opposite. People make so much money off of war that
absolutely.
That's an easy incentive.
Number one rule I learned, I was Econ 101, and the professor I had ended up becoming later on and following years an economic advisor to the White House. So he knew what he was talking about. He was one of my best professors. He said the same thing. He said, you want to fix an economy that's struggling, go start a short war.
Yep.
The key word is short.
Short war. Yeah.
That's the key part there. As you said, there's incentive to do
Try not to, disrupt shipping industries and stuff while you do it. Try not to rock the boat too much. But I mean, there's copious amounts of money to be made 100%. From killing people.
But I think that's also where the CEOs need to be involved in those conversations too.
Agreed.
CEOs of oil companies are being, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's how we get impacted. Great. Okay, let's actually, if person X wants to avoid person Y, I can't stop you from doing that. I can't physically stop you from doing it. But if a CEO is in the room, a CEO can say, wait X amount of time, please let me get my infrastructure in order. Let me invest in this, and this. Let me get this in order, then knock yourself out. Right?
Which I feel like they do. I feel like a lot of market manipulation is going on. It's just the money that they make stays at the top. That trickle down economics idea that never really quite panned out.
It doesn't.
If they would use that money to better the lives of people, that would be great. I would be all aboard the oligarch train. But unfortunately,
I just thought of another rule for Hipland. I just thought of another rule for our country.
What is it?
When we are electing our officials, they have to actually announce who their cabinet's going to be before we elect them. We have to meet their cabinet members.
You elect a cabinet member?
We elect the cabinet member, then they select from their cabinet who's actually going to be the leader.
I like that
they
idea.
Select. So we know who's going to be
Because, I mean, that would have, think about today's executive branch cabinet.
I mean,
would we have
in the world? Anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
like, I mean,
really, honestly.
The U.S. is okay, there's that. It's broken. You look at the U.K. Who's in charge?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's actually running things? Look at the EU. Who's actually running things? Where you look, the countries in Africa. You look at different countries in Africa. Okay, great, fantastic. Who's actually in charge?
Right.
Right. So that's the other rule for our cabinet.
We might need to do a whole episode just on building out Hipland because I feel like that could be a really good one.
Education's going to be a key part.
Oh yeah, no, that's the foundation for everything.
In order, not just for the people running, but in order to vote, you've got to have a certain level of education.
Yeah,
right?
that's publicly available.
Yeah. Not
To
just
everyone.
reading and
Yeah.
writing, but an
Mhm.
actual education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I'd love to
Exactly.
talk about that with you.
All right. So that's a
Anyway.
separate. All right.
Yeah, it's a whole
So
separate thing.
we're gonna have a separate episode about that. So that part's there. Okay. So let's shift over to something else. Let's shift over. We've talked a lot about this and talked a lot about, we know the solution. If there's a
Yes.
monetary incentive and a mandate for SAF, like you see happening in UK, like you see happening in Brazil, there is an investment that needs to be done into the actual infrastructure, into doing it. But once it's done, you literally are able to fatten airlines' profit margins.
Right.
It allows them to have higher wages for their workers, allows them to actually not have fewer disruptions with unions. It allows them to actually be able to order newer planes quicker.
Right.
The
The long-term benefits are there
They're
if
there.
they would take advantage of them. Yes,
100%.
agreed.
Let's talk about what SAF is and what it isn't. It's the political football. Okay, so we talked about SAF is it's solid waste, it's algae,
trash. Yeah, it's
trash.
Wood pulp, oil, all these things that we just magically turn into jet fuel with heat, I think. I don't know, chemicals.
Basically, the engineers can answer that.
Depending, exactly. We're not going to talk about that.
We engineers can answer that. I have to, when we get done with this, I have to tell you the story. I'm an astronomy geek. I went to school in Arizona, so I was into vector calculus and everything else. And I actually just met somebody I was geeking out with him. We're talking about temperatures in Kelvin.
I love Kelvin.
I was geeking out.
Neat.
So so with SAF, there is a claim that 80% life cycle emissions reduction, right? So 80% lifetime emissions reduction claim. Is that true? Is it not true?
It's true if you know what the term life cycle means and what it's saying there. Basically, it's not saying that the plane puts out less emissions than regular traditional fuel. It actually puts out roughly the same amount of emissions. It's just that where we get the source of carbon from. So with traditional jet fuel, you're digging up, millions of years of carbon. It's carbon that existed in the atmosphere, was turned into oil millions of years ago or throughout the process. And so with SAF, we're getting it from carbon that is closer to us in time. So like if we use the tree residue, it's the trees captured carbon and then we turn it back into the atmosphere. So the life cycle is not just the emissions that are coming out of the tailpipe of the plane. It's where we get the source. So that's the feedstock harvesting and the production of it. It's the processing and the refinement of it, the transportation, the blending, and then finally the actual combustion. So it's over the whole life cycle of the fuel. It can reduce up to 90%. The average for one of the processes is roughly 80%. Some of the processes are 30%. It's kind of all over the board depending on how you make the fuel. But it is an accurate claim if you know what you're talking about.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up there because I think you laid that out perfectly. I knew you're the right person to talk about this. This ties back into the processing of it, right? The actual infrastructure. So as you said, we're not trying to say that there's zero emissions, right? We're saying that there are emissions. They are roughly the same. However, the emissions that come out from there, the sourcing of that energy also has its own emissions.
Yes.
And we're using less of it. That's what you're basically saying, right?
It's called closed loop factor. So like the emissions that are coming out, we've captured on the back end. We capture it first and then we let it out.
Right, exactly. So
instead of just letting it out.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it does there. And this is important because if I bring it to EVs, for example, that doesn't necessarily happen in that side, right? Yes, EVs have fewer emissions, but the actual cost to mine lithium, the actual cost to do it, the actual mining of it, what it takes, it's 1 million liters of water for 1 ton of lithium. It's a new form of slave labor. The actual materials to make that car that's heavier now than it ever has been. I would argue that the net effect may not be what we want it to be. Eventually it will be there, but we're not there yet.
Right. Agreed.
But SAF, we are there.
Yeah. We're not mining and destroying virgin habitats. We're taking used cooking oil from your mom's kitchen or from the restaurant down the street exactly. So it's something that's already waste. And I think that's the key. It's like a true it's an upcycle basically, because we're taking things that would be trash, would be in the landfill or shipped off to India or wherever, and we're turning it into something that we already use a lot of and we need alternative sources for.
And we're using it and monetizing it. We're not asking airlines to give it away for free. By all means, you want to charge for the infrastructure, you want to charge for everything, you want to keep your prices the way they are. And we understand there's going to be a massive investment that's going to go in initially. And to airlines will say, well, yeah, but there's a capital cost, the capex of actually going in. that CapEx is already occurring because you're building rigs and drills and
Right.
everything else to go mine oil.
Yeah.
So you're already
some oil that's going to deplete. It's
Right,
not.
it's gonna
We
deplete.
can't make more. I don't understand why the industry at large can't see that. Like at some point, you're going to have to deal with it.
Right.
Why not now?
Exactly. The capital expenditure is already there. All we're asking you to do is redirect it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just simply asking you to redirect it. And
for benefits in the long run on all sides.
And the monetary incentive you talked about, if you're just rerouting your capital expenditure, rerouting your CapEx towards this, your profit margins are going to be higher. So you're going to make that ROI is going to be quicker. That return's going to be faster. You're going to be able to actually generate the profits off of it. Your EBITDA is going to reflect it. Your net margins are going to reflect it. Everything's going to reflect it. Then it trickles down into what you're able to do for flight attendants, many of whom are not unionized, what you can do for pilots who are unionized. What you're
hopefully,
able to do
it trickles down. I feel like that's a lofty goal. I just don't have faith in corporations, especially American-based ones, to do the right things by the people that work for them. And maybe that will change. Well, yeah, no, you're right. Nobody's good at it.
British ones too. Yeah, look, I mean, but if there's a clear transaction, right? And that's the other part of it, is I think that financial literacy should be, by the way, rule number 2 for our HIP land.
Yeah.
Everybody who's there, when they go to school, financial literacy is taught.
Okay, I like it. Rule number 2, that's pretty high on the list, but okay.
It is. Rule number 2. Before I teach you how to read and write, I teach you how to read a profit loss statement and a balance sheet. That comes
7-year-olds running around knowing everything.
Hey, you laugh. I went to a fishing village in Colombia outside of Cartagena. These are 5-year-olds who are fluent in Spanish and Italian.
Wait, why Italian?
Because it was an Italian Air Force pilot that actually found the school. He's since passed away.
Wait, that's so cool.
Yeah, so 5-year-olds.
They're capable. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying we've never prioritized that.
Listen,
country.
You know what? I'm kids' first words shouldn't be mama and dad. They should be assets and liabilities.
Well, there you go. I'll see
you.
If I can teach my nieces and nephews that.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Goo goo gaga and operating expenditure. And
the first ROI.
The first word should be ROI. The second word should be EBITDA.
Maybe. That's a lot to go to.
That's a lot to go to. But I just, but in general, if society has more financial literacy,
right. Agreed.
When you look at society, any society, the financial literacy of the population is under 20%.
I believe that.
And if more citizens are financially literate, they can ask more questions, right?
Be harder to take advantage of.
Absolutely. You think, look, the 10K reports are public and everything else. And as much as we understand that the trickle down effect doesn't occur unless we push the needle and say, hey, wait a second.
Unless we make them. Yeah.
Right. What happened here? Hey, wait a second. What happened here? And this brings
where did this money go?
Right.
Yeah.
And this brings me to something that's happening in Europe and in parts of Canada. So this whole jet fuel crisis, right? Air Canada came out and said, there is no jet fuel crisis. We have enough jet fuel. But then you have airlines canceling routes. And then what came out afterwards is that they were canceling unprofitable routes. And typically when an airline cancels an unprofitable route, they have to give up the landing rights at that or landing slot at that airport.
Right.
When they say force majeure, they get to keep the landing spot.
That's so annoying.
Right.
But that's very business of them.
Right.
Yeah. To take advantage of a situation and make it better for their bottom line.
Right.
And make it worse for the people who live in the communities that they serve.
What was encouraging is it took all of a week for that to come out.
Good. Okay. I love journalists sometimes. They do so good. Yeah.
It took all of a week for it to come out and to say, hey, wait a second. I know you're saying this. However, right?
Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense.
Doesn't quite make sense. So the same boat. If we're telling these airlines, hey, if you shift to SAF, we're taking the ability to mine this, to be able the ability to use this to get your resources to make the aviation fuel is actually something that is initial infrastructure is a heavy cost, but then once it's set up, the actual procurement is less expensive because it's waste. It can't be weaponized. We're just simply redirecting it. Again, the CapEx already exists.
Yeah. Can't be weaponized in the way that you and I are thinking. I just have a feeling they're going to figure out a way to do it.
You know what? Listen, I mean,
could be. Don't want to say that.
I mean, we look, I mean, you got a solid point there. We found a way. We found a way to weaponize this.
We'll find a way.
We find a way to weaponize the dumbest of things. Well, pretty soon it'll be banana peels too.
Yeah, I could see it. Maybe.
Let's actually shift over to a conversation we had earlier. You get on an airline and you're basically talking about offsetting carbon. That's not the same thing as SAF.
No. It's two completely different things.
All right, so I'm gonna have you hold on to that thought 1 second because you're gonna wax poetic, and I'm gonna love every bit of it. So before you do, you touched this earlier that right now SAF meets less than 1% of the world's aviation needs.
Right.
How do we make that 5%?
We pour money into the system. We have to figure the bottleneck really right now for most of the systems is the procurement. We don't have things in place to collect the cooking oil, to collect the forest residue, to collect or farm the algae. So we have to have more of the supply to make the fuel, because after that, it's just building the facilities to make them, which, is less, it's still capital investment, still money, but we know exactly what we need to do in order to do it. We have that system down. We do not have a national system for recycling cooking oil. And I'm sure people would have very many opinions about it and how to do it right and how, to take advantage of it if they want to do that. But that has to be, the government has to figure out how to get the thing or the company that's doing it in order to make the fuel.
So here comes the economist, because I have a solution.
Hit me with it. Tell me.
All right. So every government goes to the airlines and says, if you put the CapEx into SAF, we'll give you a tax benefit, a tax credit for this investment.
Them so yes.
You're already giving them so much. And here's the thing. It's not a legacy tax credit, right? It's simply saying, look, if you want to make your investments into oil rigs and everything else, you're already offsetting it as well. You're already getting tax credits for doing it. I'll double it. If you're getting a 30% tax credit, it'll be 60% if you go into SAF. 60%.
Right.
So which means you can write off 60% of your CapEx into this because it's innovation, right? That's the part of it.
That's how you get big oil involved.
That's how you get them involved. And anybody who says, well, that's not possible, I challenge you. India is offering tax credits until 2047 for any tech company that wants to build data centers in India. Tax credits specifically for quantum computing, data centers for quantum computing, right? So we're talking about energy suck, everything else that comes in, right? And they have the energy set aside. They have the land set aside to be able to do it. I know this because I'm a nerd. I actually am working on a thesis statement called The 5 Pillars of Global Economic Realignment. Version 6 actually uncovered the quantum computing loophole. It wasn't even a loophole, but it's a genius. We need all these AI data centers. We need this energy bandwidth that we don't have. Right? Most countries
for the path that we're on, I agree.
The path we're on, correct. But India's trying to basically say, look, before quantum computing gets weaponized like everything else, because once it gets weaponized, any encryption you have, anything you have gets busted wide open, right? So before that comes in, let's try to harness it. And again, whatever that means, right? But the fact that they're basically saying, look, we'll give a tax credit for tech companies to be able to come in and build your AI data centers here, we'll give you a tax credit that goes to 2047. So we find out the life cycle. How long does it take for oil companies to actually break even on SAF investments, right? Versus on rigs. How long does it take? If it takes 5 years to break even on that CapEx, then we'll give you an 8-year runway on tax credits. So which means you get not only a 5-year 60% tax credit on the CapEx, I'll give you another 3 years on top of that to be able to use 60% against any earned profits on that SAF, which are going to be fatter than what you do off oil rigs.
Yeah, definitely.
3 years. And it means that me as a government, I'm getting less tax.
You make it sound so easy.
It is easy. It's
I know. Why don't they do it?
Because
there's no political will.
There has to be political will.
Talked about that.
Agreed. That has to be easy. Again.
And maybe they'll wake up soon.
I asked Bonnie if she's willing to run for office. I think
Bonnie, will you please be president? She might. I don't know. She's over here now.
So I mean, it is because SAF is right now, SAF is 3 to 5 times more expensive than jet fuel, right?
Right.
We understand that.
Yes.
But is that because of the procurement or because the infrastructure are we taking into account the infrastructure cost?
It's mostly because of the procurement, because the infrastructure costs are relatively minimal.
Right.
When it put up against that.
So if the procurement, we're talking about waste. So how do we lower the cost of procuring that waste?
We put systems in. We build out a robust system to collect the waste.
So that's part of the infrastructure. So
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yes.
So the CapEx right now is only on building the rig. What we're basically saying is the CapEx should include the actual the collection.
Yeah.
And distribution.
Because making it is not expensive. Right. Relatively. Like it's agreed.
It's collecting.
Yes.
Collecting and procuring.
We're on the same page.
So if we did that, it's actually going to be there, right? The fact that it's there. Singapore, so Shanghai Airport in Singapore is one of the most advanced airports in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Singapore.
Never been, but it's on the list.
It is. I've been there several times. I'm always blown away. You don't actually see anybody when you're coming to the airport. Everything is facial recognition. Even
Yeah.
immigration,
Wow.
everything. There's nobody actually there. But in general, just the way they use energy, water, it's just incredible what they do here. And what they're basically saying, they're targeting 1% of departing flights using SAS, not by 2050 this year. So when I was working in finance, I was starting year one of a 3-year CFA exam.
Well,
At the time, there were 7,200 CFAs in the world. A CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst designation, is basically a CPA and a CFP put together.
okay.
Right? It is one of the hardest exams you have to do. It takes 3 years. There's 3 parts. If you fail one part, you got to wait 1 year and then do it again.
Oh my God.
Okay, so it could take a half.
More power to you for attempting that.
I was into it, right? I loved what I was getting, and and it was there. But this is important because the most number of CFAs are in Singapore.
Oh, really?
So
yeah.
Back to my rule for HIPLAN, that financial literacy comes first.
There it is.
So they actually have figured out, again, we see on the surface that yes, SAF costs 3 to 5 times more than regular jet fuel, but we're not counting the procurement the right way. The procurement should be part of the initial CapEx. If we build the system to be able to capture it and do it, and you know who needs to be in that conversation? The CEOs of OpenAI,
the billionaires,
Anthropic, and everybody else that comes in will help us do this. We'll help you monetize it.
Right. Yeah. You'll get your return.
You'll get your return.
We'll get sustainable and,
we'll give
the
you
good things
your
that we
tax
want.
credits as well. Right? And this goes back to something in my 5 pillars where we talk about this K-shaped economy. It's a K-shaped recovery it's not a recovery. It has been a K-shaped economy and has been for the longest time, right? And you're not going to eliminate that. You can't just eliminate that. It's not, over time, maybe, yes, okay, but we are where we are.
Right.
So the only way the bottom part of that K gets formed properly is the top part of the K is financially incentivized to create the bottom part of that K.
Exactly. Financially or mandated. Yep.
Right.
Bye.
So here's the incentive for the billionaire class to be able to come in, the guys from Anthropic, OpenAI, and say, look, you built this. Now help us build infrastructure to actually procure all of this.
Yeah.
Right. And the proof of it is the fact that all of them right now are scrambling for new forms of energy.
Yeah.
Right. Canada, which is one of the largest oil reserves out of any country in the world, is looking at nuclear power right now to power data centers because they don't have enough oil.
I was reading about that. Yeah.
Right? So clearly there's something there. If we can able to show them, hey, SAF can be used in other forms, not just jet aviation. It can be used here as well. It can be used actually to power data centers. It can be used here. You're talking about hydropower, you're talking about nuclear power, everything else, whatnot. Okay, help us do this. We'll give you tax breaks for this.
Right.
Right. Again, the mandate's already there. So what we're basically saying is that we can lower the procurement cost if we actually move that cost into the development, which is, so it's not being counted. So it should be part of cost of goods. It should be part of the actual build out, not the actual, or not even positive part of COGS. I'm sorry. It should be part of the actual capital expenditure, the actual build out.
Right. Yes.
Then your CapEx is just then
the waste is cheap.
Yeah, correct.
It's cheap or free.
Then the actual,
or they'll pay you to take it. Like it's that exactly. So
then your vendor cost, your cost of goods is simply just the actual waste, not the procurement. What's being counted the 3 to 5 times is not the waste, but the collection of that waste.
Exactly.
And that's because the system to collect it doesn't exist yet.
So in its infancy that
we have the intellect to do it.
Yes, we have all of the solutions to all of the problems.
Absolutely.
We just have not the political will.
Well, let's shift over. We're going to shift over to our last section to talk about the geopolitics of green fuel. So SAF and carbon offsetting on airlines are not the same thing.
Right. Yes.
All right. So
we touched on that.
Hit me with it. Go ahead.
Well, so carbon credits we discussed in that previous episode, if anybody wants to listen, but it's a company, an airline, paying what they call schemes, which I feel like is an accurate name, to either capture carbon or protect carbon in the environment from being released. So they buy a forest that was slotted for deforestation. That forest was going to be cut down and all the carbon from the trees was going to be released, but instead it's preserved, and that is worth, X amount of carbon credits, and they charge X amount of dollars for it. That's carbon credits. SAF is just it's reducing the amount of carbon needed to make planes fly, where, as I talked about earlier, the carbon that we source it from has already captured carbon from the atmosphere. The processing requires less carbon. Depending on how you ship it, it can be less carbon intensive. So it is a true convoluted reduction tactic, whereas carbon credits are a scheme to, maybe reduce something in the future.
100%. I mean, and yeah, exactly. Our prior episode, we went into deep detail about this, and this is why the differentiation between the two is great. I'm going to toss an idea at you.
Hit me.
The idea of SAF, the opportunity to bring more utilization of SAF, is that more effective if it's localized to developing nations?
I love this question. Yes.
Okay.
Because when something's done in a local economy, the more of the money is going to stay in that local economy. And for a lot of these, developing nations, they don't have a lot of industry, which, there's billions of dollars, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into it in the EU and even in the US. We have the money to start the projects. These countries that don't necessarily have the capital they can't invest the same amount. So they're almost going to be left behind unless we do something to help catch them up. But if we do something to help them catch up, it can be a major force for good for the local economies. And I hope we do that.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100% because it's the potential development. It is a development tool. It's an economic tool for these economies, and I'll tell you why I believe it is. So the way the road I see us going down with rare earth minerals becoming the center part of every conversation as the new, we are not going to be able to stop the mining of these minerals. It's not going to stop. However, there is a silver lining to this within these nations. And here's a silver lining. These nations are in constant debt worries with the IMF, the World Bank, and global lenders.
Right.
They're in a constant debt spiral. And if they can monetize rare earth minerals the right way to say, fantastic, come in, refine the minerals here as well. And while you're at it, create infrastructure for us, roads, highways, help us build out our
create those jobs. Yeah,
build
exactly.
out our SAF incentive. You want our rare earth minerals, build out our SAF infrastructure, build it out, build out the procurement and everything else, whatnot. And then going to the community and saying, and just two parts to put them in work. One is in tourism, obviously, from the community side of things, to be able to say, we want you to be part of the responsible tourism mechanism to protect your way of life. The other part of it is the feedstock, everything else we need. Can we source it from you?
Right.
Can we make you the producer of it? So the monetization of the materials goes directly back to your community.
Yeah.
That's the bottom part of that K. That's basically the two parts. So I would say that the opportunity,
huge opportunity,
right,
that we can't afford. If we want to build an equitable world, we have to but we have to give the opportunity for poor communities to develop their own economic system.
Of irony, right? The most powerful countries in the world need rare earth minerals. And the developing countries in the world have an abundance of these rare earth minerals.
The ones that got it. Yep.
The ones that got it. So don't just give it away, okay?
No.
You want to come here, forgive our debt, rebuild our infrastructure, help us build roads, bridges, this, that, everything else, education, whatnot, teach financial literacy.
Yeah.
Mine it, build a factory here, create jobs, process it here. And then at the same time, you're going to help us build out our SAF infrastructure because we want to move towards sustainable aviation fuel. Because we're going to lower our costs of operating. But we need to do that only if the procurement for collecting waste and everything else. If you're going to send your waste to us, if we're in a country in Africa and you're sending your leading nation X, you are sending your waste to us for us to just dump or for us to process, we're going to turn that into SAF and you're going to help us build the system to do it. We'll be happily keep taking your waste so you can keep your houses clean, but we're going to monetize it. You're going to build it out for us. If you can't do any of that, go get your rare earth minerals somewhere else.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love the optimism. I'm wondering if you have any sort of proof or what makes you think that this is the path that it can take? Because what I'm thinking of is in history, whenever we discovered oil in the Middle East in the 30s and 40s and what we did to that area in order to extract what we needed from the area. Do you think we're in a better position with this scenario to develop it in a...
Yes.
Okay, tell me why.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Because the needs for rare earth minerals back then were not like what it is now. It's not just for weapons. We need them now for data centers. I'm talking to you on a computer that is built full of copper piping, weighs like a brick. These are rare earth minerals that built this computer I'm talking to you on that come from somewhere else. It's data centers, it's chips, it's semiconductors, it's everything. The needs are far greater. It's energy, it's minerals we need for alternate forms of energy, even lithium, right?
Yeah.
We need all of these things, everything from copper to silver to gold to lithium, you name it, right? Everything else in between. And there's everything there. The needs are greater. The U.S. just signed a deal, I believe it was 6 billion or 60 billion. I will tell you right now.
Crazy difference, but yeah, it's the same amount. I mean, I can't envision $1 billion, but
Right. No,
I hope it's 60 billion.
I'll tell you
What
right
are they
now,
investing in?
for rare earth minerals out of Kenya.
Oh.
And it's $62.4 billion that's being invested in Kenya by the U.S. for rare earth minerals. And it's part of it. And Kenya basically came out and said, we'll give you the right to mine it here, but you're going to process it here and you're going to build infrastructure
Yeah.
here.
Okay. So yeah,
Fantastic.
where's the money going? Right.
Yeah, fantastic. That's all great. One step further, we
Please.
also need alternate forms of energy for our fuel because you keep weaponizing oil and we're stuck paying the price for it as a developing nation. We don't want to do that anymore. So you go start whatever war you want to start. But however, here we want to shift to sustainable aviation fuel in Kenya. So you're going to help us build the infrastructure out. You don't like it? Go get your minerals somewhere else. But last time I checked, you wanted it from us.
Right.
These countries in Kenya, and I say this to my kids all the time, right? When they're trying to negotiate, I go, it's all about leverage. And I, I would talk to my son all the time, and he's like, "What about this?" I look at him and I go, "If we're negotiating, you don't have any leverage, so go ahead and try." Here, these countries in Africa, these countries in South America, countries in Asia that are non-industrialized, that are deemed poor by society. They're not poor by their own standards, but they're deemed poor by society. They have all the leverage.
Yeah.
They have every bit. What is a country like the US or China or India going to do? They're going to go shop everywhere else.
Exactly.
Until everybody gets wise and says, you know what? I heard what you did in Kenya. We're going to do the exact same thing.
Right.
If everybody in concert asks for the same thing, that's a global union. Once that occurs, then what?
The system changes for the better.
The system
But can they do it? Will they do it? Will the people in power make the right decisions?
This goes back to the question. If it is localized to the community and if it is localized there, yes. And here's what gives me proof of this. I was in Uganda in February when the elections were happening there. They turned off the internet in the entire country. So for a week, I had no internet, nothing. I was sitting at a rooftop with my phone up in the air trying to catch a signal from the DRC. And I did. So I was pirating the DRC. But the point is that when I started talking to all the locals when the elections was coming out, they didn't care who the presidential election was because that guy's been in power. Musembe has been in power for 40 years. And I went into the lines talking to people with the police's permission. They cared about the parliamentary elections because they get to hold those people accountable because they're from their community.
Right.
That's where it starts. That's where it starts. You start having those parliamentary officials start talking about the fact that, hey, Mr. President, Madam President, if you're going to sign a rare earth mineral deal with XYZ country to come in, you build your roads and bridges and have them processed here. Thank you very much. We appreciate that you're creating jobs here. Fantastic. Great. However, we need to actually have something in the community here. We have tons of livestock. We have tons of waste. We want to be part of the supply chain for SAF. Last time we checked, Mr. President, Madam President, your airline is broke. You don't have any money to fund the airline. You're still borrowing money from other countries to fund your airline. If you can help us by getting them to pay for the development and procurement of these SAF materials, we will be able to make your airline profitable and you will not have to fund it. Your budget will be closer to being balanced. You will be less reliant on global organizations to give you money where they put these debt policies on you that are putting a chokehold on our economy. We can help you fix this. It starts at the local level.
Agreed.
So there, 100% work. I saw it firsthand in Uganda myself.
Cool.
So it's there. So, okay, let's shift over the climate smart travel. There's two questions I want to ask you. First of all, as a travel industry, how do we start asking about SAF?
Well, I think the same way we started asking about sustainability in the first place. I think as just one person in the travel industry, I can't make that much of a difference. But if I'm asking all of my suppliers and my partners what they're doing and what they're planning to do to grow the SAF industry, that one question did not make a difference. But the other 17 or 70 questions that come from my peers maybe put pressure on them to put pressure to make it all the way up to the top, that, they're hearing that they want things to change. They're hearing that their customers want things to change, so they're going to maybe make a change. So we have practice in this. As I used to be a travel advisor. I would ask my suppliers very detailed questions about their sustainability practices that they either could answer and was great and I learned a lot and, we would talk, or they didn't have any of the answers and it was, well, let me learn about that and get back to you. So then, they would learn about it and they knew more about it personally, and their higher ups or whoever they went to also heard that some pressure was coming down from the bottom. So
and
it's doable.
I love all of it. I would even add one more to it. Something we talked about earlier. Travel advisor or any of the travel industry going to that the chain up and saying, I had a pretty unpleasant conversation with a traveler who wants to come to your
Ooh,
country that has to pay double the fare because of something they didn't do. And if you're not making investments into SAF to lower your cost, to be able to not allow oil to be weaponized and to be where they're paying the price for it as travelers, they're going to go to a destination that is going to do it.
right.
So if, we would like you to take this up the flagpole in your country to say that over time, much the same way that when we first talked about sustainability, countries would laugh and go, "Oh no, people are going to still
Yeah,
keep
they don't
coming here.
care.
They don't care."
Right.
And now
Now they do care.
you start seeing they very much care. They are showing up in these conversations. They are actually being deliberate about destinations they go to. There are destinations that are not actually keeping up with the tourism equation because they didn't invest in it. So it's
Right.
true. Same way.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, well, that movement's going to occur again.
Yeah.
If these travelers are coming here, are understanding that they're paying more for airfare to come here simply because of a war they didn't start or a geopolitical effect they didn't have any impact on, but they're paying the price tag for it. They're going to go to a destination that understands the problem and says, okay, we're doing something to fix it.
Right. Or at the
Would you?
very least is less affected by whatever problem that's been
Right.
created. Yeah.
Does
If
that
your country or if your organization is going to be impacted by these geopolitical events,
do something
you
about
can
it?
do something about it. You can get ahead of it. I mean, it's going to, especially if you start right now, it's going to take a long time.
Right.
But it's better than starting 10 years down the road whenever
Absolutely.
everybody else is already there.
And I would add, the average, I don't know about you, but the average traveler for adventure travel repeats every 3 years. They don't take this trip every year.
Right.
They take different trips every year, but this is every 3 years. So if we say that 5 years, 10 years is a long time, it's not.
It's not. Right. Agreed.
So the needle is going to change. It's a matter, and again, Brazil understands it.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to do something about it. They understand it. There are countries, like you said, the UK understands it. They are doing something about it.
Yep. Agreed.
Wow. I think we solved a lot of different things. I mean,
I think we did.
We have a roadmap for Hipland that actually
We do.
All right,
education first.
All right. Anybody coming to Hipland, education first, financial literacy, tax breaks to be able to help us create the infrastructure for SAF, and send us your garbage. We'll process it for you.
Send us your garbage.
Send us your waste. We'll take care of it. We got it. We'll be able to use. Send all of it to us. Don't say it. We'll take care of all of it. We'll process it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's doable.
It's doable.
Somebody's going to do it. And whether or not they do it right and pass it down, the benefits to their people is debatable, but the system is shifting over that way. So it is inevitable.
So as a closing, what's your call to action for the travel industry?
No, you didn't tell me I'd have to have a call to action.
Yeah, come on. I
mean, I feel like people in the travel industry have more power than you realize. I think asking the questions to the people that you work with, especially, if you're a travel advisor and you have an air team, ask a member of the air team what their views and what their opinions are on sustainable aviation fuel. Ask them if they're asking their airline partners about it. Just keep putting the pressure, keep asking questions and learning more. And eventually the needle, I think, will shift for the better.
I love it. I'm going to help you write those questions. We're going to start asking together.
I like it.
And in fact, under our Travel for Better umbrella, we're going to be, you and I need to have a conversation with Annie about this because there's something we can do there too.
Definitely. Agreed.
I'm with you on this.
Yeah, wait, so we should. Yes. Okay, let's do that.
Done. That's the call to action. My call to action is this. Don't just look around and say, somebody do something. You do something.
Right.
You do something. As Jen just put it best, talk to your partners, talk to your airline providers and say, what are you thinking about this? Take it up your flagpole. Yeah. Tell your airline provider, tell your destination to tourism board that, listen, if your country's not investing in this over the next 10 years, the dime or the needle is going to shift to countries who are making this investment because they're realizing that oil got weaponized and impacted the cost it takes to get there, and they don't want to be part of that equation anymore.
Yeah, and it will happen again. It's not like, after this crisis is over, everything's going to be fine.
This is not the first or last, it's the latest. It'll happen again. So do something. Don't just look around to ask somebody else to do something. You start. Do something. Like Jen, this was, this was one of the longest episodes we recorded.
It's like talking to you.
We're just getting started. Like we could have actually been on for. There's enough material we have for another.
I could talk about this for days. Yeah, why don't
we have enough material for this for another days? I mean, I'm sure. I'm gonna note back saying, "Hey, you guys didn't talk about this, or this."
I know. Somebody on my sheet, I'm like, we didn't talk about that, but that's okay.
No, we didn't. But we talked about everything else indirectly, and we've got clear calls to action that are there. So I can't thank you enough. This was absolutely just a
my
blast.
pleasure. Truly.
We're going to have you back sometime soon.
Sounds good to me.
I'm gonna have to block off 3 hours for the next episode, though.
Yeah, maybe. I could see it.
Well, till next time, guys, don't forget, hit that bell notification, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you enjoyed here, we're actually getting our views are going through the roof right now, which is fantastic. You know, if you enjoy the topic and you want to be part of it, let us know what you think as well. Okay. Thanks again.
Definitely.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.